One more good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. So we're so glad to see on the third sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, the third session of 38th WCC-APR General Assembly on a Crafts webinar has started. We give the floor to our moderators, Miss Raja Fudia. Please.
Come, नीचे कर. और नीचे कर.
Miss Raja Fudia, we are listening.
Bend करो.
We are ready.
और bend. बस ठीक है bend.
You may begin. Madam Raja Fudia, we are ready to listen to you. Are you hearing us?
Yes, I am.
Great.
And I am.
You may begin.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi barakatuh. May peace be with all of you as it is with me here in Kuala Lumpur.
Wonderful.
On behalf of the WCC Asia Pacific region, 38th General Assembly 2020, and on behalf of the host country and Punaman Association of Uzbekistan, may I welcome each and every one of you to this webinar session on crafts. I'm more than delighted, I'm more than charmed to have so beautiful people coming to talk to us today. It has been a nightmare in one sense of the word because we face digital failure. But on the dream side, it is like having a dream coming to fulfill all the dreams that I've had for many years. To meet and to hear Mr. Rajiv Sethi, to hear Dr. Michael Well, and to hear the Honorable Deputy Minister Aziz to come together on this very momentous day in the life of the WCC-APR. Let me please inform you and just chat that over the years, the WCC, the World Crafts Council, Asia Pacific region, have always had a seminar or a forum in connection with the General Assembly. For your information, for your knowledge, we have always had many issues that we have discussed over the years. And the many issues have always centered around the issue of design, craft design, craft product development. There is always the issue of how do we strive for excellence? How do we maintain originality? How are we to be inspired? We are more than lucky today because I like to just quote what I heard from Ms. Usha Krishnan an hour ago, in which she mentioned that the products that we saw in the session before, they were amazing products. They were amazing stories of creativity that have been created during the COVID-19 period. But what we have for you today at the webinar 2020 General Assembly will be to have Rajiv Sethi to take us on this amazing journey of crafts of India and the world, because he is, and he has been, and he will always be the world's iconic treasure on crafts. So Mr. Rajiv Sethi, I know you have such a long and beautiful things that you have done and things that have been said of your work. But I think I'm too humble to have to repeat them here in public. I would like to have you come on to present the paper on current trends in craft design and welcome you as the world's as the international iconic treasure on crafts, Mr. Rajiv Sethi.
Thank you. Thank you, Raza. I have no idea whether I'm in the digital space. Can you see me?
Yes,
Oh,
I can
wonderful.
see your beautiful self,
Well,
your beautiful
great,
soul.
great to put a face on that amazing person that I've been hearing so much about. That's wonderful. Thank you ever so much. I really have been transported into another universe as I was watching few minutes ago the dancers from Uzbekistan. I recall my visiting there during the Silk Route that I was preparing in Washington, and traveling all through Farhana and to Samarkand and to Bukhara, and just completely transported into another world that had memories of my own country, but I began to understand parent civilizations, and it was absolutely a treat. And I was transported, and I thought I was back in the bylanes of Uzbekistan, and I'm still there. So I have prepared a video which might be an easier way to transmit these very complex issues that are being raised in the title of my presentation that has been given to me. So I have just played on those 3 words and I will explain this during the course of my presentation, not taking more time. Maybe you want to put that on so that one can straight away see the 200 slides that I put together in a narrative, in a storytelling. And I recorded it and sent it to both to you, to Uzbekistan, and to the Craft Council here in Delhi. I hope that all that work will be of some use and you are able to put it on. I was told that I would just come live and then you would put on that presentation. But is it on? I mean, is it going on, or would I have to improvise and say whatever I had to say?
We'll ask Aziz to put it on now, Ms. Rajiv.
Please. Thank you, Aziz.
Thank you.
I'm deeply honored to be here, and my most sincere gratitude goes to Dr. Gada, Mr. Ikrumu, Raza Fuziaji, and my dear friend Manjri Narula. Organizing this is a seminal event. My acquaintance with this prestigious organization through Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay dates back 5 decades. Some issues we had then with the World Craft Council went a little beyond semantics. The title given by the WCC for my intervention today, quite coincidentally, once again springs up unresolved terminologies. I'm to speak about current trends in craft and design. Coming from where I do, all 3 words, current, craft, and design, can be elusive. They often blur the universal message of a very critical movement. We're all gathered here to ensure the future of handmade, nurturing human skills, increasing the dexterity of this supreme instrument is possibly as important as saving the planet. Since India's independence, very few learning centers have come up dedicated to repositioning vital issues, the debate between art, craft, emphasizing the craft in art or art of craft, draws us away from the real search for the creative. When WCC started in the 1964, the well-to-do saw crafts as a studio-based activity by the few, of the few, for the few. Bless William Morris and his ilk, whose art and craft movement in the 19th century In a post-industrial world, waking up to monoculture impacted the elite pursuit of aesthetics. Negotiating the culture of the colonized in their effort to understand the other, the British went about setting major centers of teaching arts and crafts in our part of the world. The Mayo College of Arts and Crafts, Lahore, the JJ School of Arts and Crafts, Mumbai, pedagogies clubbing arts and crafts at the Presidency of Bengal and Madras, coming up with a whole new ideas of design. The Tagores at Shantiniketan indigenized the search for a new India, seeking an exclusive future for our past. There were artists I call the lost generation that reinvented local metaphors for new creative frontiers. Post-independence, India's Babudom, still recovering from the imperial system of governance and its top-down approach, created its own hierarchies. We dropped craft from the teaching curricula of art schools. The Brown Sahibs bifurcated handmade as Hastashilp, separating fine arts as Lalit Kala. Although the original preamble of the Lalit Kala Academy under the Department of Culture did not make any such differentiations, India's fine artists made the academy their own stronghold, distinguishing themselves from craftspeople. Hastashilp was relegated for traditional artisans, with the Department of Handicrafts set up under the purview in those early days as the Ministry of Foreign Trade. The government only took notice of traditional skills as possibilities for export, and developmental support depended on the size and scale of craft clusters with the potential for employment. Kamla Devi and Pupul Jaikar worked very hard to change their high and lowness in Indian creative journey, forming a board of craftspeople as stakeholders with knowledgeable experts. Gira Sarabhai, with a discerning contemporaneity, added the pedagogy for new directions with National Institute of Design. What one found problematic with World Craft Council, even then, was that while we looked at crafts as a livelihood for millions, developed societies treated their hand skills differently. What they deemed as new crafts could actually easily be replicated by the many in countries with low wages. The scale of what was possible could be economically and sociologically quite intimidating. So our handicrafts, even with their uniqueness, have remained downsized as traditional artisan wear, while studio-based crafts of the developed world attained a higher status with much better price tags. Market-driven recognition catering to a broad base of varied consumers, whether they be local, regional, national, international, comes out of building brands. People feel secure and find them so reliable, even if the prices are high. That's very okay, and it must continue to be so, especially if it's handmade. But the same must apply for the handmade from our part of the world too. Too many hands can't mean too little. So the term handicraft, however, like hand-spun khadi in Gandhi's India, has become an elephant in a dark room. It is much abused label, no longer certifying the use of skilled hands as a principle in its manufacture. In this age when the mechanization determines the role of hand, head and heart, so-called labor-saving tools have started to devalue human touch, impacting the feel and look of anything made by hand. I would have preferred the title for my intervention today to be Creative Frontiers for Working with Hands in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, or How to Stay a Step Ahead of the Machine, or How to Tell the Real Handmade from the Fake Machine Made. And this is not about crafts being traditional or non-traditional. So let's take up the first word in the title given to me today, the temporal adjective current. Like contemporary or modernist, it points to a thinking that relegates traditional arts to a sunset sector, barely suffered for its sentiment and made sick with inefficient subsidy. This sector is deprived of modern mapping, appropriate technological interventions, economic investment, and marketing outreach. Yet, however, knowledge systems have never been static. Traditions are alive because they are dynamic, because they change, develop, transform, shape, and further. The traditional is also informed by innovators, although it manifests as a collective expression. Individuals seeking to improve the quality of our lives continue to make us whole, disrupting, defining diverse skills. 40 years ago, I met Rahim Bhai, living in a colony of biscuits near Bombay. He felt an urge to create unique clay amphoras for his personal maikhana. This imaginative maker found a way to fire his delicate creations buried in the low and slow heat of ash kept in tin can canisters used for storing biscuits. Rahim Bhai's eccentric forms became a rage within his community, but couldn't take off in the market because support recognizing a handicraft required official sanction as a bureaucratically designated cluster of traditional skills. So another farmer in Haryana made this, it meticulously developed indigenous tools and agile fingers while waiting for his crops to ripen. Miniature Gandhis spinning cotton were trapped in a whiskey bottle. Resonating his own sense of humor, he taught his neighborhood to recycle alcohol bottles with gods and goddesses appearing within. Yet no one saw this as a craft or current trend with the legitimacy of skill or commerce. Here is Bhattobai, who made her dolls from scrap 30 years ago, refashioned in a city slum in Gwalior for an exhibition I made in 70s. After she died, the last dolls disappeared. And what about the anonymous, untrained sculptors creating dinosaurs and motorbikes with aluminum and plastic wires, weaving baskets out of telephone cables, as in South Africa? And our legendary boat builders, are they mapped? And bullock cart makers, today as new transportation takes on high tech. Some extraordinary creations I have had the privilege of working with. Creators include ephemeral effigy makers creating Ravanas that we set on fire each year. And Tazias, here today, gone tomorrow. Here is what we did this year during the pandemic: a green Durga, a Corona Ravana, and a COVID Lanka, with physical but not social distancing. Nate Chand, a storykeeper in the Public Works Department, PWD, secretly created a rock garden in his paradise in Chandigarh before it became world famous as the work of an outside artist. I believe my current practice has been as old as my career, transgressing conventional lines set up for interior architecture. Hopefully, I'll be able to add a few more years to the last 5 decades of renewal and invention. One will continue to celebrate the work of hands as a prerequisite in whatever I do. I'm committed to a very vulnerable present, getting a sense of a more tenacious future. Now, let me share with you how traditional masters themselves feel about the word current. Most of them lack the English vocabulary, but the quality of their experience has its own edgy meaning. Here is Ganga Devi from Madhubani. She places a holy book Ramayana on any surface she begins to paint. She slides it along, consecrating each space just before her brush picks color. Once I saw a pot of ink spill accidentally. She winced for a moment, but unlike most traditional artists, continued to paint on it, in it. The blob of black turned into a massive cave for the tiger of the goddess. So the gods willed, she exclaimed. Her contemporary Chandrakala Devi, whose husband was a railway ticket collector, once told me that while traveling in a train every day with all the movement within and without, she saw the whole holy epic of Mahabharata appear on all the walls in the toilet. If creativity can happen there, she believed it can be anywhere. So I helped her create installations for the first time in papier mâché, extending her skills of making grain jars and small ritual votives of Shama Chakeva into 3D sculptures. Here Sita Devi is painting over her forms to create a marriage scene for my exhibition. Kesaria Ram from a village near Agra made this stone bench in collaboration with Mario Bellini for my Golden Eye exhibition. In New York, his idea of the grooves carved on the surface was his own, making gullies to drain rainwater. Here are a few more prototypes from my exhibition at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in 1985, showing traditional skills interface with contemporary sensibilities of creators who are more than architects, designers, or craftspeople. There's Charles Moore working on with Benares toy makers, Bernard Rudowski with Babu Lal and his earth shoes, Fry Otto with Gopilal Lohar for cutlery with Damascening, furniture with Zubair Ahmed, pottery from Khurja, Teji Ben tent, which were manifested in many different forms with Zandra Rhodes later, Eture Sotsa tableware and console with Agra inlay and Chennapatna wood turners. Look at this Banjara embroidery made 100 years ago. Would you call this a traditional motif or a current design? Its makers said, no 5 fingers are alike. So why should what comes out of a hand be uniform? I've collected of 6,000 painted scrolls made by Patuas of West Bengal, traditional picture storytellers who are also painters and lyricists. Apart from repertory of ancient tales, they enjoy creating narratives about the French Revolution or tsunami, with the last ones being for our foundation, the Asian Heritage Foundation, on the corona pandemic. Art scholars refer to these artists as folk arts craftspeople, while
I'm
a
on
famous
air
Indian painting
Tashkent. I'm
influenced
in
by
air
the
on
Turkish called
Tashkent.
a modernist and
I'm
of
on
my
air.
artist. So the art craft conundrum, I think, is a hopeless colonial construct, and I consider it our excess baggage that will take a few more years to shed. Manjeet Baba here with Chandrakala Devi, a famous Indian painter. Likewise, Jatin Das with his lac work. This is all happening in Dongar at a tribal festival that I did about 30 years ago. Look at what my dear friend Salima Hashmi of College of Art, Lahore has done, offering graduate courses in a traditional miniature painting for a whole new generation. Look at Madhvi Parekh doing work with papier mâché and with lacquer work to create hats and toys. Remember, the word craft has lately been devalued in the Western world also. New York opened its Museum of Contemporary Craft in 1956, renamed it American Craft Museum in 1979, finally changed it to the Museum of Arts and Design in 2002, dropping the word craft altogether. This takes me to the second word in the title given, defining also this council's raison d'etre. I've already alluded to the term crafts being classified in India as a handicraft employing millions. Crafts in Central Asia, of course, is a hugely different thing and must be addressed, I think, differently to what the rest of the world, the developed world, see them. However, my grandmother spun this pasham for my shawls, as indeed she wove all the drawstrings for my pajamas on a homemade loom set up seasonally in the courtyard. She didn't see her strenuous work as labor or call it handicrafts. Every woman with a household skill, like in the Northeast, represents the bottom of a huge pyramid we call crafts. It is current as their own quality of life. I feel the WCC has to address this humble base of craft with urgency. It's really, he wants to further the everyday culture of making, doing, and being. Millions of incredible hands don't see their skill as current or tradable commodity, but making something for themselves or the family is an eternal act of affirmative endearment. So how do arts and crafts organizations address this basic human need? I feel our approach as craft organization is as important as people passionate about promoting hobbies. I'm not downsizing anything. Let me share two views from my exhibition at the Smithsonian and Barbican in the 80s, showing what can happen when we turn household skills into a livelihood. We call it Sone Pe Suhaga, luster on gold, as seen here with Madhubani and Mithila art, or as magical pictograms of the tribals, Sauras and Varlis with their ritual wall paintings, or as Chandrakala Devi, newfound expression in Pepimashi. Our critical concern, I feel, must reinforce recognition, reinforcing the vital connection between hand, eye, and the spirit. The emotional retina staying always a step ahead of the machine to remain current forever. For me, craftspeople, very important people whose hands are connected to the brain and heart, offering us what only they can make with their minds, who see handwork as the only viable alternative to poverty, or at worst, migration in search of small earnings to the city. I feel that for example, the jharu makers, the indigenous broomstick makers, who migrate from village from time to time, represent a skill worth supporting. But in a world replete with the vacuum cleaners, we will only start to map the variety of brooms made in any region once we officially classify it as a skill and find ways to market it. Gandhiji queried, produced by the masses or mass-produced, as seen in the Naya Daur, a film made in the 50s on the whole idea of handmade. What we really need to work on is the living conditions of millions of self-employed people existing in the fringes of society with only their hands to support them. Has their contribution to economic indices so gracelessly dismissed as unorganized ever been measured? It is not merely about what is sold in urban emporia or airports, or what comes out of a city studio, nor is it really about what is made in mud huts forming a cluster. Maybe it's not even about the so-called handicrafts constituting the bulk of our experts today, churned out in factories in towns nearby. Making assembly line products doesn't mean that the anonymous artisans are not capable of making things with greater artistry. This is an issue the World Craft Council must explore and help reinvent for the world of automation, marginalizing this instrument, safeguarding personal satisfaction of the skilled and upskilling them in the humdrum of manufacture, I think, is imperative. Jogging jaded perceptions and exercising our five fingers each day in a world forgetting that this connection with the brain must feature in mainstream agendas of not just world bodies, but every school and college. I'll come to pedagogy in the end. I've tried to extend the practice of our foundation, AHF, to turning every artisan hub into crucible for creative enterprise, helping artisans themselves become interpreters of emerging needs. You're looking at slides of my work in Rohtak, in a village where I had set up the Dehati Kala Kendra for rural crafts for rural consumers, helping to bring out creative in everyone with an emotional connect with the handmade, with new ideas. Now, but the real handmade, informed by such agility and subtle action, motivated by a story that moves you, cannot be replaced by anything made by super duper gadgets. Look at this iCat, for example. One is machine, the other from Central Asia, the other is, machine printed, the other one, or silk screen, and the other one is actually resisted, dyeing each thread to create a pattern once it's put on loom. Today, the world is rapidly configured ways to produce anything without dissemination. Look at these examples of weaving, printing, embroidery, or painting. Changing our interface with the skilled. So the WCC also has to distinguish and certify the real from the fake. It must convince governments to promote the handmade 101% as never before. Many khadi or cottage industries enterprises with their fancy bleeding hearts boutiques make a pretense of helping poor craftspeople, claiming benefits for promoting heritage with tags of fair trade. In fact, several of them hide exploitative work conditions and polluting processes camouflaged under the term handicraft. Few classifications to certify 100% handmade will also have to be formed with active search for carbon footprints, calibrated with the parameters of environment and social factors. All about factor 4, even 4 times removed from the price we pay for a product. Here, handmade will score well, becoming more competitive. Here are a few examples of what our Geo enterprise is making to explain empowerment with new craft design. Bamboo. In Sabai, the grass where women worked and earned for 15 rupees a kilo are now making lamps and lights and earning 10 times that amount. Or wallpapers, whether they be in Kond tribal or in Kalamkari or in miniature paintings. Or Suzni, the embroideries of women with an asymmetry that only eyes and hands can produce. The more sexy term, design, described with no word in any Indian language, and there are many. The occupation designer is hijacked by fashionistas, lifestyle pundits, gadget gurus, even social engineers designed for life. I've been looking for a more suitable word that might explain my transdisciplinary and sensory approach in whatever I do. Curators have no Hindi translation, the word curator, so I'm a bit wary of it. At an international showroom for crafts, you may chance upon this mask or this painting, but our craft boards are not there to tell you that the artisan making the mask or the painting is on a picture scroll is also a dancer, a singer, and a lyricist. So Charles Eames would say, everything connects, which could well be the hashtag of my life. We also have our own Vishnu Dharmottara Puran, an exchange between the sage Markandeya and King Vajra. It says, to be an architect, you have to be a dancer to be a sculptor, a musician to be a poet, and on and on. So why are we making ourselves so incomplete, putting creativity into silos or leaving the arts to the artists and crafts to the craftsmen? The American philosopher Loren Eiseley wrote that one cannot pluck a flower without troubling a star. As the Jains call it Divjaya, this is an interior house that I've done in Ahmedabad, which follows Jain ideas to create artworks. It's life's interdependence. Or what the one and only Ilaben talks about as Anubandh, being inventive with whatever we have around us. To do this, we need to distinguish need from greed, to do more with less, and be devoted to something larger than design. Rejoice in the deeper sense of being, of bhakti. Divine meaning is a prerequisite to any profound act of creation. The forced absence of the spiritual makes us cynical. So-called rationalists or trend seekers devaluing this critical dimension. Time-honored quests of living communities have always reflected in the arts, marking tangible the high points of human ingenuity and dignity. The intangible presence of the divine religious or otherwise, has inspired seminal works in literature, philosophy, metaphysics, architecture, music, dance, sculpture, and theatre. This equation is likely not to change. It's what the Sufis call fanaha zikr. 2 plus 2 is never 4 in the realm of the spirit, and without it, there is no creation. So finally, to help you decide whether what I do is current, craft, or design, I will take you through a short journey with a few of my personal projects. The stories I'm trying to tell over many decades involve merging theatre, design, film, crafts, and arts with compelling social narratives, while reaching out to a public differently exposed to immersive art experiences. I tried to devise highly crafted and layered installation designs long before any of us had heard the term scenography. Those were from a pavilion that we did called Ek Yatra on family planning in '72. It's our first intervention as a group called Idli. Actually, I only became a scenographer after a court dispute in the year 2000 while creating the theme pavilion for Expo 2000 in Hanover. The German government felt more comfortable engaging with a company formally registered as scenographer. The tax administration of Government of India, however, never heard the term and mistook scenographer for stenographer, and the matter had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to be resolved. So in 1998, I was invited by the German government to create one of the 6 theme pavilions for the Turn of the Millennium Expo 2000 in Hanover. I was given the theme of basic needs and also free hand with lots of support to select my team of eminent environmentalists, pioneering theatre groups like Bread and Puppet Theatre in the USA, a little bit of which you will see right now. Working with several grassroots enterprises from 30 different countries, one created this award-winning 70,000 square foot multicultural pavilion. The Basic Needs Pavilion was hailed by the international press as the apex of the World Fair. The German government also equipped my office, perhaps for the first time, with enough material resources to exercise some of my enduring fantasies. The expo gave me an international opportunity to deal with questions on need and greed, of human survival, the dangers of consumerism and its ravaging impact, on carbon footprints and what people can do to empower sustainability. In 2002, I returned to the Smithsonian after the Festival of India in 1985 with Yo-Yo Ma to scenograph the unparalleled Silk Road Festival involving craftspeople, performers, change makers from over 22 countries, celebrating the concept of building bridges and connecting cultures. If you notice the big domes in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, and the capital of America in the back, telling these Americans where these forms also appeared. They were names of countries that they couldn't pronounce because it was just after 9/11. I was uncomfortable with so many strange artists, many from Islamic countries on the National Mall, mixing with millions, laying out artistic handmade renditions of major landmarks from Venice, Istanbul, Bamiyan, Samarkand, and Xi'an to Nara, and devising them as architectural sentinels of arrival along the east-west axis of the National Mall in Washington. Millions of visitors of the National Mall seemed to be enthralled. Kilometers of handmade boundary walls, hand-painted tents, and props over the central vista of Washington, D.C. were all made in India. The media once again acknowledged that they had never seen an event as evocative in this scale before. Simultaneously, I was appointed the Chief Scenographer, Goodwill Ambassador, and member of the Senate Committee for the Universal Forum of Culture, 2004 at Barcelona. I also conceived, designed, and produced the Sky of Aspirations, workshops developed in several continents and finally installed in Barcelona. The Tree of Life installations on microcredit at Barcelona included handcrafted paper props with popular pictorial traditions and textile architecture coming together. Around the world, we've arranged live theatre with craftspeople, performers, over many months, workshops and participative improvisations. That was a backdrop for direct marketing of products made by micro enterprises, especially from South Asia. During Aditi and Golden Eye, my exhibition, showcasing numerous rural craft skills, the craftspeople earned a total of about $2 million. The exhibition as a whole generated revenues of about 3.5 million. It cost our government much less than about $250,000. This was in the last century, in the 80s. There are at least 1,000 such international events around the world, while hundreds of skills can have a profitable presence. Now compute the numbers, and let me add to the next big shelf of what I think will require crafts. This is my T2, my airport project in Bombay, where the owners, the Reddys, agreed to put 2% of all the amount they spent on the building towards crafts and to create it with artists. And that is what resulted in this 3-mile artwork with 3 more artworks, which we will show at another time.
This is a craft work that was done at the airport, 3 mile. Dia 35 minutes. Bukan senang nak dapat dia. I can't hear him. He's saying something.
These are some of the views of houses that I've done using crafts and hotels. So I believe the next great shift for craft will have to include infrastructure. It'll have to be about arts and architecture, about engineering, about where big building projects are coming up. Like, for example, the freight corridors that the government is making. This is just one from Bombay to Nagpur. But it's going to be a huge highway for freight. But just look at the bylanes. Look at the villages they are passing. Look at the number of crafts that are existing there, which could suddenly become mainstream. And imagine what tourism could do for them if this could also be used for slow.
Boshlayapmiz. Michael nima bor? Chiqinglar, ey. Bu chiqiyman boshlayapmiz hozir. Hamma ko'ryapti. Ms. Rajafuzia, Mandira is with us. If there are any questions, she can read the questions and answers.
Can I speak first? Can we thank Mr. Rajiv Sethi for that wonderful, amazing story that he has shared with us, and it will be a real dream for all of us to take it with us, because it is really unusual, delightful, and I feel that if there are questions to Mr. Rajiv, he will take the questions. Aziz?
Ms. Rajafuzia, we have a question from Dr. Kevin Murray. It would be interesting to learn from Mr. Rajiv Sethi whether he saw a need for organizations like his and WCC to help preserve crafts by documenting them, or is there other dangers in putting craft in ASPIC?
I think your two questions are very connected. There are many organizations that are actively involved in conserving, preserving, and nurturing the creative. I've already taken much longer than I had promised, and there are other speakers. I would love any questions that do require serious consideration to be perhaps asked of me directly, and I would do it. But in all fairness to the other speakers and to the organizers, that if we could do this at another time, because these questions are very important, and I think they cannot just have a very standard, easy, short reply. But I thank Razia ji for having given more time, and I really believe that we should, my question time has already been taken up by my presentation, and you've all been very gracious. I do believe the other speakers who are waiting now should be coming on, and I'd be very happy to be always available at the Asian Heritage Foundation site or wherever you ask me to come, or to personally answer any issues that are coming up from this particular symposium. But meanwhile, I thank you with all my heart. Was that, I don't know if anything got through.
Yes, I got the message, Mr. Rajiv Sethi, and a promise is a promise. Did you hear that?
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. I'm always with you.
I'm sure that you have given us that. We will follow up, and we will do that pretty soon. And I think you have actually put on such a wonderful story within a story within a story that it's difficult, as you say, in so short a time to unravel all the wonders and all the things that have been put together, because each is a story by itself. It's a big volume. And I think once we want to dissect that into strips, and then we can get our team to meet with you.
Thank you.
That should be perhaps the next step we should do. Since you are there for us, we would love to have that.
Thank you.
But perhaps I could just say to all the participants what I did not say at the beginning, because I wanted to carry on the story of the amazing story from Usha to you. And that is, you were honored by the government of India in 1986 with the award of the Padma Bhushan, which is India's third highest civilian award from the government. And I think that was way back in 1983 when we were just fresh talking about crafts with Kamala Devi and all the Gandhians. But how can I feel so small to talk about such a great, iconic international person like you. So may I conclude by thanking you on behalf of the WCC, but please stay on, Mr. Rajiv, because we have two more speakers who would like to share.
Of course, most certainly, most certainly. Thank you, with all my heart.
Thank you, Mr. Rajiv Sethi.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aziz, am I on?
Yes, you can now start with the second speaker.
May I welcome His Excellency Mr. Aziz Vaitov, the Deputy Minister of Investments and Foreign Trade, Uzbekistan, who will speak on understanding the changing markets, e-commerce. Your Excellency. His Excellency will have 20 minutes and 5 minutes for question and answer.
Thank you, dear colleagues, dear participants of the event. Let me greet all of you in the 38th General Assembly of the Asia Pacific World Crafts Council. It gives me a great pleasure to attend in this event and give a speech about the role of marketing and e-commerce in the development of arts and crafts. While the coronavirus pandemic has worsened the economic activity in the whole world, e-commerce has undergone and continues to play a crucial role in reducing the negative impacts of the coronavirus and increasing economic resilience. More broadly, e-commerce has the potential to improve the economic efficiency, create jobs, narrow development gaps, and increase socio-economic inclusiveness. This includes giving small and medium-sized enterprises the opportunity to enter global markets and compete internationally. The coronavirus pandemic has led to an acceleration in the digitalization process. Consumers now shop online much more often. The number of people who use the internet as the main source of information and entertainment is growing year by year. According to experts from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, during the pandemic, the number of buyers of electronic and digital goods increased by 10%, pharmaceuticals 9%, furniture 8%, cosmetics 6%. At the same time, the e-commerce segment showed the fastest growth in 10 years, which increased by 27% in 10 months of this year. In comparison, last year, this segment rose for 60%. It should be noted that due to the coronavirus, all sectors of the world economy, including tourism and handicrafts, have been severely affected. Currently, there is a decline in tourist flows all over the world, which is leading to a decrease in demand for traditional handicrafts, trinkets, and souvenirs purchased by tourists as a keepsake. However, in the next 2 or 3 years, one should not expect the return of the previous volumes of demand due to the pandemic. The period of lockdown and the decline in tourist flows to the Republic of Uzbekistan also influenced the activities of Uzbek artisans. As a result, many of them went digital and opened online stores in famous electronic trading platforms abroad. In particular, the Uzbek Craft and Art store successfully sells products of look applied art in the vast American electronic platforms eBay and Etsy. In addition, some domestic artisans have established e-commerce portals where it's possible to sell products of national handicrafts via the internet for foreign markets. The online stores uzcraft.com and uzcraft www.settings.com are among such portals. Also, it should be noted that before the pandemic, domestic craftsmen activity participated in traditional international exhibitions and fairs in order to present the rich cultural heritage and historical traditions of our nation to the world community. However, due to the cancellation of international exhibition events because of the coronavirus, artisans switched to an online format. In this situation, they are provided with all kinds of support from the expert promotion agency under the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade of the Republic of Uzbekistan, which covers the costs associated with their participation in such events and assist in the search of potential clients. Dear friends, in conclusion, I would like to note that the coronavirus pandemic has forced craftsmen around the world to innovate their activities by digitizing sales channels from traditional to electronic. The use of e-commerce tools in the work of artisans has helped to gain direct access to buyers, thereby increasing the ability to access global markets while reducing the costs associated with the traditional way of promoting trade, such as attending fairs, exhibitions, and opening trading houses in the main markets abroad. Pandemic and lockdown taught us that in future we should be ready to adapt to new global challenges, and I'm sure that development of e-commerce will help us to overcome them. Thank you for your attention, and in this difficult time, I want to wish strong health to all participants and their close owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Am I on?
Yes.
Can we ask whether His Excellency will accept question and answer?
So far, we don't have any questions regarding the second topic.
So we thank His Excellency for the brief introduction and to say that e-commerce is the way forward for the time being, and looking at how well we can generate sale and trade through that medium. I will now go on to the third one, Aziz.
Yes, we can start third topic.
The third topic is on telling and selling your craft stories. We would like to invite Dr. Michael Mell. Dr. Michael Mell has had a distinguished career as Director of the Pacific Collections at the Australian Museum in Sydney. He has been passionately involved in research and taking on from the research finding to putting on publications, exhibitions, and curating shows related to the Mogi of the Western Highlands province of Papua New Guinea. He has his own story to tell, and we would like to invite him. But first, let me also say that Dr. Michael Mell was a recipient of the Prince Claus Award from the Prince Claus Foundation for work in cultural communities. Dr. Michael Mell, can we invite you now?
Thank you, Raja. You can hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. Na aga ipri yung ignimbente. Tundinga wamp konam banga pui morman. Ngut korong orong. Ok mogen mai muk ya mai kui kai menbe rebeting. Etekan ten orong. Na mogap nente aga ya iling garigal wampgat moruman wampig na angenant but ninga untu mongor ngwam kiga angenant agab mogbun wati ut mradag mugmin wati wan bagal de gwing wan but ninga wam tumbuna wan bandrubde enant. I acknowledge all of those of ancestors that have come before us, who laid the foundations for us, who laid the foundations to care for and look after everything that we have found. We acknowledge, we appreciate, we indeed commit ourselves to protecting and enhancing and strengthening all of these for those that will follow our footsteps. That's our commitment. I also want to acknowledge the Gadigal people on the lands on which I am today, to acknowledge that they indeed bequeathed everything to us, and it is unceded. We hope that there will come a time when this will be properly acknowledged and shared. Thank you. Just as a way of introduction, and before I go to my topic, listening to Rajiv Sethi, and indeed, Madam Chair, as you've announced and you've shared, he's provided us the wisdom, the experience, and the knowledge and the insights of where we should travel in relation to and how we should navigate. For he, like sentinels, has seen and continues to watch out. And who are we but to follow his wisdom and his insights? And it was truly a grand occasion for him to be leading our talk this evening, or at least this evening for us here in Sydney. So thank you, Rajiv, very much in your footsteps. But I am but a minnow in terms of where you are and where home is in terms of Everest. But I will keep knowing and keep at it to ensure that ours is protected and ours is maintained in the small time that I have. So I thank the WCC and in particular Lindy Jobert for asking me to be alongside the speakers tonight, this evening. They have provided us wisdom and great insight, and I follow in their footsteps to add to what they have quite humbly shared with us this evening. And I also want to really say that this is my first time to be associated with WCC, and in particular on this most auspicious of occasions on the 38th General Assembly. I thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I come from the Pacific, and it's so apt that it's the Asia Pacific, and I thank for the Pacific to be included in this way, and very much. But tonight, as I speak, I will not be speaking for all Pacific Islanders, because as you and I know, the Pacific is represented with many, many communities. Obviously, the continents that are bigger in relation to the region, from the East Coast, from South America to the North America, across to Asia, and in particular to Australia and New Zealand, as the awardees that have come from representing the Pacific have come from those locations, and they've done some grateful and wonderful work. So grateful, very happy to be alongside the winners, and indeed with the work of Lindy in advocating and supporting the work of Pacific Islanders. Just very quickly, I am wanting to share with you something in relation to resilience and endurance, and in particular coming from the Pacific. Raja, I will ask you to flip the slides as I go through, so you will get the cue from me. So thank you. If you can just go back a bit, please. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Just keep it there. Just keep it there. I come from Papua New Guinea, and I don't want to go through a geography lesson or anything like that at this point in time, but please be mindful that there are well over 800 languages in that one small half of the island. The other half is, of course, part of Indonesia. But with 800 different languages and distinct, I might add. And in that sense, there are those many, many cultures. And in those contexts, there are many, many samples of what could be so poorly quoted as handicrafts. No. And as I will go through in my presentation, they're not handicrafts. They're not determined to be that way. In fact, such a way would demean them in the way that they've been made. I want to give you a sample of one object from my own community as an indication, as a small indication, a microcosm of what is a labyrinth of a system, of a worldview, of knowledge that equates what seems to be a very mundane, very everyday object. When you put into perspective and context, it becomes so enormous in the way it's seen and held, and in the way people, either consciously or unconsciously, in the context of modern development, have taken it to heart and continue to bring it. Yet, in this day and age, not yet, you're revealing all my secrets. Raja, move back, please. Please. Just go back a couple of slides, please.
Aziz, can you get?
Just go back a bit. I'll give you my cues, please. And I'll say next slide. That's when you flip it on, not now. So if you can picture that one object provides a labyrinth of knowledge and worldview and information. The only sad part of this is that we've come into a context where it gets treated as handicraft. It belongs to the work of women. It belongs an everyday object, mundane. It's of no skill, and so it's very poorly treated. But when you look at it from another worldview, it's very significant. And that's the thing I wanted to share with you tonight. And in the context and the way in which I've witnessed the prizes that have been awarded, the creativity and the ingenuity and the inventiveness that has been shared throughout this afternoon, there is much that's happening in our region, both in Asia and the Pacific, for which we now need to take a very, very different approach in how we celebrate and accentuate, and in fact, gravitate towards these becoming much more than just simply handicraft. Okay, the object that I refer to is, in my language, is called wad. And wad is a very significant, because in my context, as I understand it, as I know it, it represents much more about my people. But in the context of the English language, it's called the woven net bag, or in the Creole, it's called bilum. So the bilum, or the woven net bag, which is in Melpa, wag. Next slide, please. Good, thank you. And just to accentuate this, and before I go to talking about the wad, because that will come in a moment, the point that I wanted to make in this set of slides, and there's much more that is happening there in the picture on the left and the picture on the right. But the point I wanted to make is, when you see all the feathers, when you see all the shells, when you see all the masks, when you see the bows and arrows, and all of these go as a picture to providing a performance and engagement. And it's a process. For me and for my community, in relation to the material of things, it's not about materiality. It's not about the feathers. It's much more than that. When adorned in this way, there is a sense of spirituality in this whole process. So the idea of an object, to be treated as an object, to be treated as something that is looked at and then cast aside, or looked at and celebrated for its own beauty, that seems to be the very dominant view and perspective. But in the context of these cultures, there is much more than. There is a sense of spirituality, to the point where to separate feeling from thought, that seems to very much the dominant perspective this day and age. In our context, and if we want to talk about celebrating what is really uniquely and specifically in our own communities, we need now to think that thinking and feeling are entwined, and to be known and lived in that way. Indeed, if we are to talk about things like subject and object, inner and outer worlds, art from indigenous communities, art from Asia, and the Pacific is not about object itself. It's about relationships. It's about connectivity. It's about the meaning of art and object entwined. It's much more. It's about the personal and the social intertwined. So we cannot now begin to talk about craft and handicraft as something that's separate, something that's treated as an object to be dealt with and simply put in as craft. As the Solomon Islander has written, in his context, from the island of Malaita, his community perceives reality as a socially situated and integrated and wholesome context. So therefore, creatures, humans, as creatures, we are assumed to be part of such a world. The actors and actions of creatures are spatial and exist within time. Both speech and silence are equally important as knowledge-making strategies. So to constitute the socio-spiritual world that is unbroken, that is cyclical. And in contrast to that, we live in a world that is linear in view, that separates, isolates, privileges, and highlights parts and their changing nature. I think we need to be very, very mindful of that. Next slide. Thank you. Today, I work in a museum, and I now I don't want to be speaking out of turn with the museum, but at the same time, I'm leaving the museum for reasons for which, some of which will come through in the cracks of my talk. The separation of objects when colonial masters, when the discoverers, or so they discovered the Pacific, but there were other discoverers, but that's another argument for another time. For now, the objects, the separation of people, the separation of objects taken away and today displayed as entities and objects, devoid of communities where they originated from. And quite often, for a long time, they were seen to be the places where they celebrated their prowess, their sense of power and control. So institutions like these quite often accentuate their very sense of who they are. And we continue to, our knowledge and our language continues to harbor that and support that in all the things we do. And in this context, I'd like to think that this one object, if we look at it differently, we need now to treat it a lot more differently, and in this context, rearrange the furniture in institutions and organizations like these, because they continue to perpetuate and maintain a status quo that is totally imbalanced and unfair. And that, in that context, history continues to perpetuate that imbalance in relation to people and communities and knowledge, and indeed their worldviews. Next slide. Thank you. And we are now talking about the bilam, the wad, the woven net bag. It was a very significant object, very significant, very, very, very significant in the context that if you see the two images on one on the left and the right, they continue to have a baby in there, an infant. In my own language, wal represents the wal, not only the external bag, but the internal bag of where a child is born. And the process of from conception, the wal, our people knew that there was a bilam, there was a woven net bag, nature's woven net bag that carried for their child. After birth, there was a bilam, a net bag prepared specifically for the child. And the child was put in that bilam to put it to sleep, to feed, to carry, to care for, to nurture and grow. So the bilam bag is very significant when you realize that the connectivity between motherhood, maternal instincts, and the presence and the clarity of our women in our communities, and the care and the love and attention and the relationship of women in our communities. Whereas today, the discourses have always been that in those places like New Guinea or in the Pacific, women were lower down, women were maltreated and mistreated, seen to be lower than. Or when you see that sort of knowledge system, there was a sense of balance, a sense of connectivity. Indeed, to take this point a little further, the Bilam quite often symbolizes a relationship that from birth to death, the mother and the mother's people, the maternal links, are forever treated, forever gifted, forever regarded and celebrated. And one passes on, the mother's people, the maternal links, are the highest gifted. Gifts are bestowed upon them because it was through the Bilam, it was through the netbag that we are here. So the netbag is a symbol of life for us. It is not an object, a craft made by women. It is much more than that. Next slide. And the netbag not only served for that purpose, but it was also for carrying things. It was very much a very practical object, in as much it was very symbolic for both men and women. It was for harvest from gardens, a hammock for infants, an object to carry and slung over, and put the knickknacks and bric-a-bracs, put in your secrets inside your bag, hidden away, and versatility was its game. Next slide. Indeed, today, and in this picture, the mothers harvested a passion fruit, a very different, slightly different compared to the ones that I've seen here, a very sweet and much sweeter than this ones. And the moms have harvested all of that inside that bilam to sell. And you can see a wonderful image of our motherhood and about the practicalities of life and to the caring and the love of motherhood, symbolized through the bilam bag. And in that context, it is much more than just simply an object that is made by women as a craft. Thank you. Keep going. Next slide. And so in the context of PNG, Papua New Guinea as a country today, when you see communities and youngsters take on and wear the bilam in a very, I suppose, in some ways unconscious, in some ways very much aware, they continue to take a bag, small handbags, slung over the shoulder or over on the back of the head, on the heads and on the back, or simply held under the arm. They represent a sense of the significance and the value, an unconscious and unbiased, but clearly an indication of the significance of the bilam, not only the bag itself, but at what it means to be Papua New Guinean. And those colors are, and if you remember the flag, are the national colors. And that is now translated into bilam bags in the way they wear them now. So in the 21st century, the bilam bags that were made of traditional material have now given way to polyester, fiber that's imported, with colors that are translucent, that seems to be more colorful. In the hands of our mothers and those that are knowledgeable, traditional knowledge and their versatility continues to amaze the creativity in adapting and adopting material, adding on things so that there is a continuity, a relationship of the bilam bag in our communities. Next slide. And in this context, you will see on the right side, you will see a bilam bag that's very much made in relation to bark and kept its natural color. Whereas on the other side, the three that are there have been made very clearly with different styles in relation to the yellow and the multicolored striped top. They are meant to be for infants and for a bride to be given that, so that when her firstborn is made present, the child is then put into such a bag. and becomes her bag or his bag as he or she grows up with the mother. And the other one, the lower down one, but all three of them are made with introduced material, whereas on the other side, you will see the local material in the bark that has been made. All of these are very much to do with and following on from the communities and the people that have been made, that are part of the communities. Next slide. Thank you. And in this context, there is a need, and there is already activities going ahead in relation to the popularity of the Bilam bag, of it being an object of desire, of it being serving a purpose, and it being taken up by various people, both in country as well as overseas. So there is a way in which the e-commerce, the marketing now of going on the internet and having websites available where this is now being taken on. So there is a way in which this is being promoted and cultivated. But there is much more that needs to happen and much more that needs to be celebrated. So the utilitarian end of things quite often becomes the focus because we need the money. And the sad part of this is that because this happens to be the more dominant way of operating, where we commodify all of our art to a financial resource, that quite often we compromise all the other aspects of what this means and how this means. And in that context, that's why I've left the Australian Museum to begin to go back and to really engage with communities and really speak about the fact that we need to celebrate and we need to accentuate a lot more than just simply objects that simply are for the commercial purposes, for the profit margins, and for those that simply treat ours as merely objects. Next slide, please. No. No. Yeah, that's it. And then in this slide, it was really about how, in amongst all the people, there's one that's begun to make, not over the last 5-10 years, she's begun to take the Bilam and the knowledge of these to a much broader and much more expanded level of understanding and appreciation, acknowledgement. First and foremost, Florence, who is the artist on the left in the corner there, she has taken the knowledge and began to weave the Bilam herself and began to develop as a way to exhibit and showcase, to the point where she then began to see that she needed to involve more and more. So she's gone on, and the next slide, the next image beside her, where there's a blue house, she's built this small facility where all these women have been brought together to work together. And amongst the many that they've created, one of the ones that has gone into a major private collection is that material that's up on top there, and was exhibited most recently in the Queensland Art Gallery as part of the triennial, as well as that in the Art Gallery of New South Wales. And it takes pride of place now. And in that context, there's an expansion of the knowledge and the skills, but even more so, an appreciation, a recognition of all of these is very significant. And that it simply is not enough to say ours is just for the utilitarian project of life and to be treated, but it is much more than that. And so in this context, she's taken it up. Finally, the slide on the left is very much to do with fashion, of taking the knowledge of Bilam making and then to weave it into tops, into material that can be worn and can be made. It can become fashionable. In fact, it hugs the body, just like a Bilam of old when we were born as children. So today, in this day and age, in our contexts and communities, there is a great need for us to become more and more aware of our own worldviews and our knowledge, and how we now need to articulate that so that our processes of articulating ourselves through our craft or through our art, if you like, our knowledge must accentuate, must find a clarity in relation to the spaces that we create, rather than being dominated by a certain agenda that continues to identify ours as efforts that are simply much lower down in the scale of things in terms of art, in terms of the finer things of life, when in fact our approaches were all about life and inclusive. I thank you. Thank you for listening. Agap Mandananti. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael. Thank you.
Ask whether there are any questions to Dr. Michael. Aziz, are there any questions?
Yeah, so far we don't have any questions for the speakers.
There is a question. There is a question by Kevin Murray.
Please.
It would be interesting to hear from Dr. Mel if he had any advice for designers who might be seeking to work with film makers, say for connecting with foreign markets in areas like fashion. Can this be done sensitively with the community's interest at heart?
Yes. Good evening, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think the opportunity should be there, collaboration should be there. But as you rightfully point out in your question, the relationship between the different communities, the knowledge systems and the processes, there is a way in which you could articulate, accentuate and highlight aspects that are significant to each of the communities and the artists. And I think the possibilities are there. And in particular with that particular artist that I've pointed out to you, but there are several others. I've just highlighted Florence, but there are several other artists. And I think the opportunity should be open and we should be able to talk. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Aziz?
Thank you.
Aziz, may I summarize now?
Yes, please.
On behalf of the WCC Asia Pacific region, I would really very much thank our speakers, Rajiv Sethi, Dr. Michael Mel, the Honorable Deputy Minister Aziz, and all of you who have come and to support the webinar. I feel quite at a loss today because we have been watching earlier the AOE Prize recipients. We have seen the new communities, craft communities coming up. And here, the last one of the day, I have so many issues that I piled up on my little sheet that I don't know really where to begin. For the first time in my life, in my career with craft world, I feel just quite lost. However, if Aziz can just give me a minute or two, let me just run through what points we have picked up. We were always stressing on the handmade. We're talking about to look at the living conditions of the artisans, the makers, safeguarding, upscaling, trying to distinguish between the real from the fake, empowerment, to differentiate between need and greed, and the need for infrastructure and connectivity with architecture and other domains in order to bring life to the works of the craftspeople, not to see them in the isolated condition of a craft object, but take it as part of a lifestyle, part of a living structure. And then we have a question of the resilience of the origin of craft and telling the stories as should be told and not to just look at it from the commercial point of view. And then the issue of where do we go when we have all these things sorted out? Does e-commerce provide the venue for the trade, for the selling, and for the promotion of these products? I feel that we have many issues to look at and to deal with, just like what we would have done. And I suggest, and I would like to say that we put this into a document and let's take it up with the masters, with the gurus, with Dr. Michael Mel, with Rajiv Sethi. Sir, I call you just Rajiv, is that all right? And others who will offer their expertise, their knowledge, their heart and soul. But I think we take away with us the issue that it is with the hand and the mind and the heart, the three things that really makes up what crafting is about. What craft should, the process of making, the need for the making, the need to re-look at ourselves making things should then be the revitalizing the use of the hand, taking it to the heart, to the mind, and to the heart. Therefore, there will be this connectivity and there'll be a meaning to the end, to the product that we produce. Is there any other contribution to this summary? Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Fuzia. Thank you. In this high mood, I think we can conclude our today's virtual event. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants and the panelists, today's curators, Madam Usha Krishna, Manjari Nirula, Edric Ong, Miss Lindy, Dr. Kshu, Dr. Gada Kadumi for her great, excellent speech, and all other speakers, Dr. Rajiv Sethi, Dr. Michael Mel, and Dr. His Excellency Aziz Wahidov. I think today was a great day, the continuing day of tomorrow, of yesterday, where we had a great business meeting. And I would like to congratulate all the presidents and vice presidents with this great event. If you permit me, we would like to gather here on the scene, all the organizers from Hunarmand Association, all the masters, and say not goodbye, but see you next year in a Kokan festival for the inauguration part of the electing of the presidents. If you have any comments, you are welcome, please.
Can I speak? Thank you, Mr. Aziz. I think Mr. Aziz.
Madam, Dr.
Mr. Aziz. Yes, Mr. Wu, thank Uzbekistan, Professor Ikramov. Second day of the General Assembly, which was really performed, implemented, and done fantastically. Thank you very much for this nice finale. And I hope to see you, to start, cooperating with you, maybe by the end of this month, where we start information you need, anything, and to cooperate. And we will in September, inshallah, for handing over the presidency physically to Mr. or Dr. Ikramov. Thank you very much again for taking over this part of the General Assembly. And I would like to thank everybody also who had, whether speakers or even performance who were on one part which I was unable to attend. And I would like now to say goodbye, and until we meet again, I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gada, for your closing remarks.
Bye-bye to everybody. Till we meet again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hello, Karina.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
กัน
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope
Thank
we meet
you.
so
Thank
much
you,
very
Kaka.
soon.
Thank you, Aziz.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye, Edric. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Manjari.
you.
Thank
Thank you very much to everybody.
you, Edric. Thank you, Raja
Grazie,
Fusi.
buonanotte, Usmati.
Thank you, Kevin.
Congratulations. Well done, Aziz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. That was brilliantly done. Thank you very much. Raja Fuzia, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Raja Fuzia, your sound is off.